Which email marketing tool has the best and most powerful A/B testing features? Let's find out. Hello, I'm Shane Malach from Active Growth, and today I'm looking at these email marketing tools, and specifically I'm looking at the A/B testing features. Why? Because A/B testing is a hugely powerful feature. If you have an email marketing system and you have a convenient, easy to use and powerful A/B testing tool in there and you use it all the time, that will have a greater impact on your bottom line than possibly any other single feature in one of these tools. That's why today I'm going to take a closer look at that. So these are the tools we're looking at. These are simply some of the most popular email marketing tools I keep getting asked about, and we're going to go through them simply in alphabetical order. Our first candidate is ActiveCampaign. So right here on ActiveCampaign, there are two types of A/B tests we can do. The first is when we use a so-called campaign. That is what they call their broadcast email. So if I go test email here, I can choose to do a split test on this email. Then we go through this process where here we choose who receives the email and we can add segmentation. And here, importantly, we can choose to either just test different subject lines and from information, or test completely different email contents. And I quite like this choice at this point, because if you just want to test different subject lines, that's a much easier, it's a quicker test to run than testing different contents. But you do have the choice of both. So you can basically make it more convenient for yourself. And this is the one I choose most of the time, right? This is a very simple test to run, testing different email subject lines. And that's pretty simple to do. So we choose this and go further through the process. So here we'll choose one of the templates. Template selection isn't great in ActiveCampaign, I have to say. But here we have test subject line 1. That would be the first one. In the next step, we compose our email message. And here, this is not that easy to find actually, but it points it out to you if you try to leave this step before setting a second subject line, because so you basically have to click on this gear icon, and here's where you can add one or multiple tests. So then we can do, it just creates a copy, so we can do test subject line 2, and we can even do more of them, so you can test multiple subject lines. And once you have this, so here you set up your subject lines and also the from information and so on. I usually only test this, and the body or the content of the email is going to be the same for everyone. So then we go to the next step. Here we get a summary where we see separated by comma the different subject lines we've entered. And what's really good here is we can choose either to just run the test and basically let's just find out, and after the test has run its course, we can try and learn something from the results. Not that interesting. I like this option, determine the winner. So you can either determine it by best click rate or best open rate, and you can choose a time period. And this mostly depends on the size of your list, right? The choices you make here. So if you have a decently sized list, you can maybe delay, so you can send a message to, you can send the split test to a portion of the list, and then 3 to 5 hours later, determine the winner and send the winning subject line to everyone else. And here's where you choose the ratio. So a 10-10-80 split, that would mean that first 20% of your list get the message, and they're randomly split into two groups of 10% each with the different subject lines, and then whichever one gets the most opens or clicks, depending on what you choose here, the other 80% of your list will get that winning message. For most lists, especially if you keep the time window short, unless you have a huge list, this is not a generous enough split. I like to do a 30-30-40 split. So even though that might seem like you're wasting a lot of traffic on the test, but really it means that 70% of your list will end up getting a better subject line, right? And I really like this because it basically means that you can just do this on every message you send, and you don't have to manually do anything. You'll just know that in the end, 70% of people on your list are going to get a more targeted message or a better performing message. And so then here's where you set up your sending and you send the message and the rest happens automatically. So this is really cool. So this is how in ActiveCampaign you can test your email broadcasts. So that's one-off emails that you send to your whole list or specific segments of your list. But there's a second and perhaps even more powerful way you can do A/B testing in this tool. This happens in what ActiveCampaign calls the automations. This is where you can do a flow of conditional actions of what happens when. All right, so we start, let's say someone subscribes to one of our forms, and you can define what exactly that should be. And you have many choices here. The idea is simply that someone enters your automation, maybe when a tag is added, when they submit a certain form, when they do a certain thing, they enter this automation flow. And what you can then do is you can do things like send emails, of course, but also you can split your traffic, or you can split everyone who comes into this automation. For a typical split test, we want an even split, and then we can define when this should end. And so a good way to do this is to define a goal. So you can say, I want this to end when, let's say 300 people have met a goal. And the goal would be something. So maybe they register for a webinar, or maybe they buy a product. And in most cases, this would happen through tags. So you can specify conditions and you can really specify all kinds of stuff. But in most cases, you would have something like a customer tag, right? They've bought something. So we have a bunch of customer tags. This is an application I'm actually using for Thrive themes. So I could basically say when someone becomes a customer, so they make a purchase and we have a system that adds this tag to them. That's the goal, right? And I can say, I want this split to run until 300 people have reached this goal. And once 300 people have reached this goal, we're going to look at which of the two paths has been more effective. So which of them has had a larger conversion rate related to this goal. And we're going to send the rest of people coming through this automation down the path that was more effective. So this is great. This is great for many reasons. First of all, because you can so freely define the goal, it can be anything from just getting people to open your emails, or getting people to click on links, or getting people to buy stuff. Whatever your goals, you can set them here. And the other thing is that now, of course, what we can do is we can say, okay, send an email. So we can do something like this, right? We're sending people different emails, and over time, as people come through this automation, we find out which one works better. But we can send people down two completely different paths, right? We can use we can send emails and messages. We can have different intervals, right? Different waiting periods. We can have different segmentations. We can try, a series where we send them a short email every day versus a series where we send them longer emails less frequently. We can try hard selling promotion versus storytelling. Whatever you want to do, you can build two completely separate paths here and find out which one works best. So this is really powerful, and the implementation is great. I think the implementation is very straightforward. You can easily imagine how this works. And there's this automation aspect to it. So just like with the broadcast emails, you set this up once, you just leave it running, and you know that once the goal has been completed by enough people, everybody who enters this automation will go down the more effective path. One downside I have to mention for ActiveCampaign is that in our case, to use this to track something like a purchase goal, so like I showed, we basically split and see which path leads to more customers, but we did have to build a custom integration for that. So there are not many first-party integrations, like codeless integrations between ActiveCampaign and things like payment providers or membership tools or e-commerce tools. They're slowly starting to build that, but that is one downside that I think is significant, right? It would be much better if you could just directly hook into your PayPal or your Stripe or whatever and get purchase data, and even better would be revenue data, and be able to test for revenue. That would be perfect. And that is currently not possible unless you're using one of their very few deep integration type integrations. So that is a downside. To get really the most out of this, you'll probably have to set up a Zapier integration or get some custom coding to send the right tags over to ActiveCampaign whenever someone makes a purchase. But overall, this is some impressive A/B testing functionality in ActiveCampaign. Okay, candidate number 2 is Autopilot. So we have some way, let's do let's say someone submits a form, they enter this journey and they enter an automation flow. And we want to do A/B testing. So we have an action here called an A/B split. So we can say when they submit the form, they go into this A/B split, and then we have A and B. So we send people down different paths. And we can set the split amount, right? So we can do a 50-50 or a different kind of split. So then we'd have our usual actions. So let's say we send an email on path A, and we send a different email on path B. And we can get, we can see this quite visually here. A goes here, B goes here. Now, so far, so good. The problem here is that, unlike with ActiveCampaign, we can't tie this directly to a conversion goal, and we can't automate this. So we do have the same kind of thing where I can choose two completely separate journeys to send people down using all of the usual actions. So that's great. But if we actually look at how it's explained in their knowledge base, the example they give of how to do an A/B split test is actually this here, where they basically say you send people down this actually two splits here and test these two newsletters. And the idea is that you send the rest of your traffic down a delay, right? You have them wait, and before this wait is over, you're supposed to go and manually check which one of these performed better, and then copy that email and put it in here. Okay, so they're basically saying, send the email, put a reminder on your phone or something that, okay, before this 1 day delay or 2 day delay or whatever it is up, I got to go and check these two emails, copy whichever one was the better one, and then put it in here into this path, which we have a 10/90 split. So most of the people will then be going down here. So this is basically the problem with the Autopilot integration. So theoretically, it would have this power of being able to give you two totally separate paths and being able to test out the paths. But because you basically have to manually then look at the reporting and look at what works, it's not taking action on what you learn from the test results isn't easy. So you can either follow their advice here. This would be for basically a broadcast, right? You send one email. And then make sure that most of the people get the email that perform better. I think this is not an elegant solution. I mean, it's better than nothing, and there's definitely some worse solutions, as we'll see, but it's not great. And what you can also do is, if you do create two totally separate paths, which, like I said, I think this is one of the great things is you can do more than just test different emails. You can test totally different journeys, but it will make it difficult to then take action on that, because you'll have to go and find out, okay, which one performed best, where did I get the most sales, and then somehow deconstruct this journey or create a new journey based on the one that won or something. It's not ideal. So I think what they need in Autopilot is a way to measure these paths against the goal. So on this block right here, basically, I should have to be able to define what am I wanting from the two paths, right? Basically analyze those two paths for whatever, higher click rate, higher open rate, more sales, something, and then automatically choose a winner. That's what's missing here. One thing to note about Autopilot is that they only have these so-called journeys that you build. So if you build a follow-up sequence or a campaign or whatever you want to call it, where people come in continually based on some action and go through this flow, you use these journeys. But also, if you just want to send out a broadcast, a one-off email, you build a journey that says, everyone on this list gets this email, and that's it. And this is important because for the A/B testing, well, what I just showed you, so they have an A/B testing feature that's a bit inconvenient for one-off emails, and it's even more inconvenient really for ongoing complex follow-up journeys. So I feel like with Autopilot, it really is, okay, they have an A/B testing feature, but it misses the mark. This could be so good if it were combined with goals, but it's not. So this is, I would consider this a near miss. Okay, next up we have an old school email marketing tool, Aweber. From looking at Aweber marketing stuff, we can see that they do talk about getting higher email open rates by split testing subject lines, for example. And there are some old videos about how to do it, but then if you try and find the current instructions of how to do it, this is the closest I could get. It seems that there used to be a split testing feature in Aweber, but there currently is not. So in their campaigns, I couldn't find any way to do it here. In their message, where you create broadcast messages or emails, I couldn't find a way to do it either. So it seems that it's simply not possible. So here the answer is pretty short. For Aweber, there is no A/B testing for broadcast emails, no A/B testing for follow-up campaigns. That's it. Feature doesn't exist, or at least doesn't exist anymore. All right, next up we have ConvertKit. ConvertKit is a newish kit on the block, or at least it's become popular recently. So let's see what it's got up its sleeve. When we create a broadcast email in ConvertKit, we first choose who receives the email, and then we go to the next step. So here, similarly, you can choose which list, you can add segmentation criteria, that kind of thing. And here we have subject line 1, and right away we have this feature here for an A/B test. And I got a error message there, I'm not sure why, but anyway, this would be subject line 2, probably because the email was empty, right? But anyway, you can test subject lines. You can't test content, but I think this is commendable because it's a very simple, straightforward feature. You can only test 2 versions. You can only test subject lines, and that's it. Now, of course, it can be really powerful if you can also test your email content, but this is like the 80-20, The most convenient thing to test is the subject line. It's something you can do every time you send an email, and it's kind of the simplest thing that you get the highest return on. As soon as you go into testing different email content, maybe with different links and so on, things get complicated, but you might not get significantly better results for how much more time you'd have to spend on this. So I think this is actually good. Obviously I prefer a more powerful feature, but just having a simple thing, do this, right? A/B test, like test 2 versions of a subject line, that's it. Just do this every time you send an email, you'll get good results from that. So then on the next step, here we can see that each variation will be sent to 15% of subscribers. Then the winning variation will be sent after 4 hours. As far as I can see, there's no way to edit this. That's just the default setting. They should make this editable. And simply because on a smaller list, this will not work. Like I said before, I prefer to use a 30-40 split to basically get a more reliable result. And maybe 4 hours isn't enough, or the 4 hours is reasonable, I think. But yeah, I would like to be able to change this. So again, I think they went for, you don't think about it, we'll just do this for you, which can be good. I would prefer a bit more control here though. Now, what about in follow-up sequences? That's a little complicated in ConvertKit because there's 2 aspects to this. We have sequences, which are basically linear sequences of emails, and we have automations, which are these automation flows that we're used to from other tools as well. So let's have a look at one of our test flows here. So what we can do is we have a trigger, someone gets into this flow, and then we send them a series of emails. And the emails aren't individually represented in the flow, so this is a sequence of emails that someone goes through. And if we look at the email sequence itself, in here, there are no A/B testing features. There's no way here to do the same thing, for example, with the subject line. So we can't do that. Then let's go back to the engagement. We can have conditions in the flow. So we can jump to somewhere when a tag is added or removed, or when a certain date is reached. We can send an email sequence, add or remove tags, or add a delay, and we can have a condition which is based on a tag or custom field. But this is not like a split, right? So I can say, okay, does the person have this tag, yes or no? Now, theoretically, it's possible to use such a conditional split and kind of try to randomly assign people, and group A and group B tags when they sign up. And then you can try and run something like an A/B test on an automation using one of these conditional splits. But no, that is not real A/B testing. I've seen that, in some cases, and we'll get back to that in a later example, actually. Sometimes this is advertised as, yeah, you can do A/B testing, right? You can do it like this, manual assign tags and manually check reports and stuff. No, that just doesn't count, right? And so in conclusion, with ConvertKit, we have a very simple, very easy to use and good A/B testing feature for broadcast emails. That is, it's good, but it's very limited. And we have no A/B testing for follow-up automations, which is too bad. But that's where we stand with ConvertKit. Our next email marketing tool is Drip. And I gotta say right away, I was disappointed in the A/B testing features in Drip. Let's look at why. So in campaigns, which are linear sequences of emails, we have split tests. We can create a split test here and we can test one of three things. We can either test subject line, the from name, or the timing of delivery. Subject line would be, again, it's usually the most convenient, highest yield thing to test. So let's choose that. We choose one of our existing campaigns. So the idea is you create your campaign first and you activate it and then you choose it. And then you create a split test and kind of add that campaign to the split test. So already, if this sounds a bit convoluted, it's a bit convoluted. So now I'm choosing an email within this campaign that I want to test. Choose this, go to the next step, and then this is my first subject line, and I go subject line 2, something else, right? And I can add more variations. So I can test more than 2 variations against each other here. But then from here, I can start the test. So, and then I have a report for this specific email within this specific campaign. So again, if this seems confusing, it's because it's confusing, right? It's so that I have a report about a split test that runs on a specific email in a campaign, which is a series of emails that I've created before. And there's also, as far as I can see, there's no automatic winner. So the idea is I just come back here and determine which one is winning, and then end the test and choose which one should keep running. And this is just for a subject line test in one email in one campaign. So I'd have to do this I have to go through this and make sure my labeling is good, right? So I know what the hell is going on for all the emails in my campaign. I don't know, this just seems unnecessarily confusing. To make it more disappointing, we have for broadcasts, if you send out a broadcast email to your subscribers, there's no A/B testing there. There's simply not possible. And then let's look at the automations within workflows. So in a workflow like this, where we have different steps and different conditions, some of these steps are campaigns. So this step here represents a campaign which contains multiple emails. And within this campaign, I can be testing a subject line of an email, but I can't tie it to a goal, right? Again, there's no, basically the A/B test is almost like it runs separately from everything else I'm doing here. And it can't impact, the results of the A/B test can't directly impact my workflow, which kind of defeats the purpose of, that's what you'd want from an A/B test within a workflow. We can also have conditions here, but just as with, actually no, a fork is a different thing, it's a bit of a strange thing, but we can have conditions like what we have here, right? We check for a tag and we have a yes and a no path. So just like in ConvertKit, theoretically we can somehow finagle this into something like an A/B test, but I don't recommend it. And in fact, this is like disappointment part 3, is that this is what they basically recommend. There's a tutorial here that basically says, okay, apply different tags, apply your bucket A and bucket B tags to people, and then use those tags to send different messages, different broadcast messages, and then check your analytics and then so on. This is not real A/B testing, right? This is not randomized to begin with. And if you have a bucket A and a bucket B and you're constantly running tests on the same 2 groups of people without further randomization, the more tests you run on that, the less relevant your results will become. So in summary, we can do A/B tests in Drip, but only to individual emails inside campaigns, so inside sequences of emails, and we can place those sequences inside an automation workflow, but there's no automatic winner, and we can't make a flow where we automatically adjust the flow based on what performs better. So and we can't A/B test broadcast emails. So really, this is why I said I was disappointed. Look, Drip is in every other way. Drip is such like a geeky power user marketing tool. You know, it has such great features to do some really powerful marketing stuff, but somehow on A/B testing, they have completely dropped the ball. And I really hope that they will improve this in the future. But as of right now, this is pretty bad. Next on our list is GetResponse. GetResponse does have an A/B testing feature, and it does it whenever you create what they call a newsletter, so you create an email, and in the distribution settings, it's strange that it's well hidden like this. But anyway, you click on this and then you turn on A/B testing. And so here you choose your list, you create your message, very similar to the first steps that we've seen in other in tools before. And yeah, so here's where you decide whether you want A/B testing or not. Then you go to the next step. Here is where you will be creating your actual email content. We have an email builder with various blocks and a mobile preview and so on. So you compose your email here, you go to the next step, and then you have an A/B test type to choose from. So you can choose to test subject lines, from fields, content, so you can create a different message or even use a totally different template, or different delivery times, which is, I think, great. This is, you know, it's a good idea not to test these things simultaneously. You want to isolate a single factor, so having this as a multiple choice here is good. And I like this interface. You know, it kind of walks you through in a very obvious way. The only issue really is that initially it's so hidden. The A/B test feature is hidden like that, but the flow here really makes a lot of sense, and then it's very convenient to do, right? So we have subject line 1, line 2, and we can add more, and yeah, it's just as you'd expect. Then we go to the next step. Then we choose recipients on this step, and we can also have some exclusions. So that's again similar to other setups we've seen. And then we have this visual representation. How cool is this, right? You can choose how the email will be split. It seems that it's limited at 25, 25, 50, but I guess that's fine. And then very importantly, send best message automatically. That's, you know, for me, this is the point of using tests like this. You can choose open rate or click rate. That makes perfect sense to test. And you can choose a duration. So here again, we could have what I had last time, something like 5-hour delay, and you can be notified. So this is how we create a split test. So the split test is part of the email message. Now in GetResponse, there is now also a automation builder like this, and it has basically all the typical stuff we're used to. You can enter people into automations, you can add steps such as moving someone to a list, and you can connect the steps to each other to create workflows. And what we can do here as well, inside one of these, we can have our message. So this would be an email message, right? Sending an email message. And we can choose what kind of message to send here, including newsletters we've previously created, A/B tests we've previously created. So in here, we can also select A/B tests, right? We can choose to A/B test an email within this flow, which is not the same as being able to split the entire flow. And as far as I can see, there is no feature to do a split of the entire flow. But we can have messages within the flow running A/B tests, and we can have those messages automatically optimized. So with GetResponse, we've got a pretty good, pretty user-friendly A/B testing feature, which can apply to broadcast emails. And we can also have emails inside our follow-up workflows or automations be automatically optimized. That's good. So you can think of it like you can have your automatic workflow, and it can get better over time, get more people to open and click over time. But you can't test two completely different flows against each other. And you can't basically try two different flows and automatically lead people down the more effective path after a while. So this is one step removed from the kind of thing you could do in ActiveCampaign, but it's still pretty good. This is one of the better A/B testing feature sets that we've seen. Our next tool on the list is iContact. In iContact, when we create a message, we get to choose from many of their totally overdone templates, and we'll just go with the default one here. And in the editor, here is where we can change our email content, and we can enter a test 1 subject line. And we can also call this, AB test 1 or something. So this is what the message will be called. And then in the tools here, we can create a split test. So we create a split test, and we can duplicate the message. So I would compose my message first, and then say duplicate, and then I can change the subject line, and I can also change the content and whatever else I want. And I should have actually switched to version B here first. So here now on version B, we've got test 1 as the subject line, and version A, we've got test 2, but it matters not. We have our 2 test versions that we can switch between. So an advantage of this feature is that we can easily test subject line and content, and it's pretty straightforward, right? We just use the same editor for both. A disadvantage or a limitation is that we can only have 2 versions, which I think isn't, this isn't a huge problem. I generally test just the control and one variation anyway. So then we can do our previewing and all this kind of stuff to get everything ready to send, and then we go to prepare to send. In this step is where we choose who receives our message, including segmentation options as well. And then here it's a bit strange. I mean, we have this pre-checked send as split test because, well, we set it up as a split test. We can't uncheck it, but never mind. We have our name that we can change here again, and we can choose the percentage. So in this case, what this means, if we set this to 40% as here, it means that 20% and 20% will get our 2 variations, and then the rest of the list will get the winning variation. Interestingly, the way this works is that, as you can see here, after you decide which version performs better. So I don't choose a conversion goal here. I don't choose open rate or click rate or something. The idea is that I take a look at I take a look at the reports of these messages, and then I choose which one I want to send to the rest of the group. So it's not as automated, but it's not too bad. It's not like super inconvenient either. So in iContact, we have got a passable A/B testing feature. Basically, this is very middling because it's fairly well put together. It's not too complicated to use, but it does require manual intervention. And it's just not that great. It's not bad. It's not that great. It doesn't really stand out. But there it is. That's what you can do in iContact. Our next tool we're testing is MailChimp. And surprisingly, MailChimp does have A/B testing features. I didn't expect this because MailChimp is usually kind of basic and beginner oriented. But take a look at this. In MailChimp, when we create a campaign, we can create an email. And here we can choose to run an A/B test. So we'll call this A/B test demo, and let's get started. Then we choose who should get our A/B test, and we can send to everyone, so the segmentation happens in this step here. And then next up, we can choose what to test. So again, it's kind of like the other way around a little bit from what we've seen before. Here we kind of set up the parameters of our test first before we get to the actual content. Now I can choose to test multiple subject lines, or we can choose to do the from name or the content. But as you can see, it's kind of like the GetResponse version where you could choose one of these things to test, and when you test one, you can't test the others, which is a good thing. That makes sense. So let's go with subject lines like we've done in all the other examples, and here we can set how many people this will be tested on. Again, same principle, right? We choose basically the size of the 2 groups that the test runs on, and then this is the group that will get the winning variation. So we set this to whatever we want, and then we have by open rate, click rate, or even by revenue. So if you've connected it to an app that tracks revenue, this is great. This is a great option. And again, I'm surprised. I didn't expect this from MailChimp, right? This is the kind of thing that I would have expected from a solution like Drip, but not from MailChimp. So this is great. Well done, MailChimp. Okay, so we have open rate. You can also do a manual selection and set the time. And here we kind of get a summary of what this means. And then we move to the next step. All right, so then we have our name. Here we enter our subject lines, test 1, test 2. And this is a little snippet that can appear in the email preview. We can't test that, but that's fine. And here we do a bunch of other setup for what we want to track, Google Analytics integration and things like that. And then we go next. Here we choose some template as usual. And because we've already set up our subject lines before, our test setup is already done. So here we just compose the email. If you choose to test the content, then here you basically create your content and create a version of your content to test and then go to the next step. And then we're basically done. So here we have an overview of what's going on, and we can then choose to schedule or send the email. Now, MailChimp have also introduced what they call automations, and these automations are in this kind of way, kind of like the Aweber ones, basically series of steps, so linear series of steps, where you send email messages and you can have triggers. You can have triggers other than just wait a certain amount of time. You can wait until someone does a certain action, clicks on a certain link. You can connect it to e-commerce and trigger things by what people buy. But it's not the same kind of, it's not the level of sophistication that you have in a proper workflow builder or automation builder like we see in ActiveCampaign or Drip. And also with these messages you design here in these automations, there's no A/B testing feature for the follow-up or for the automations. So with MailChimp, we have a good A/B testing system for broadcast emails, and in fact a very good one because you can even connect it to your shopping cart and test for revenue. That is so cool. I want that in all of the tools. And you have no A/B testing for your automations or follow-up campaigns, but these campaigns are very basic to begin with. So, if you want to build sophisticated workflows, you're not looking at MailChimp anyway. The next tool on the list is MailerLite. And in MailerLite, we can create a campaign. We can create a new email, and right here we can choose an A/B split test. We could choose to test either the email subject, the from name, or the email content. And once again, we'll go with subject. So we have test 1, test 2. And then we go into the next step, which is selecting the content. What I really like here is you can also get the templates and all that, but you can also just do a text editor, and I'm all about those text only emails. So here we compose our email, and remember we've already set the 2 test subject lines. So here it's just about the content. Then we go to the next step. Here we define who gets our email, and we can segment our subscribers into different groups and choose which groups get the email. And then we go to the next step. And here is where we get to choose the split. So here at the last step is where we decide how to run the test and what to do with it. And once again, we have a visual representation of this, which I think is great, of how the split will go. And we can choose to select the winner by open rate or click rate, and we can set a delay. So it's very familiar actually, right? It's very familiar with the other systems we've seen. But that's it. Here we set up our test, and then we set the scheduling or send right away. So that is for sending a campaign, which would be a broadcast email to your whole list or a group on your list. MailerLite also has automations. So you can create these flows that can include email messages, delays, and conditions, such as did someone interact with the previous email, or is someone in a specific group or not? And you can define various actions and things. But in these flows, there is no A/B testing. So in MailerLite, this is starting to look like a familiar story. We can do A/B testing for broadcast emails, fairly good feature set there, but no A/B testing in our follow-up campaigns. So again, it's kind of a middling solution, but it's certainly better than having no A/B testing at all. Next up is another interesting tool, Mautic. Here, when we've created an email, we can go in and choose to add an A/B test to the email. And this takes us through all the other steps. So we can choose a separate template. We can change the subject line. I'm going to do that. And we can also change, so this would be email test version or something for internal labeling. And here we have to choose how many people will get this. And this is the total split. So if I say 25% here, that means that the original that I created this A/B test from will get 75% of the traffic. And then the winning criteria, we can do read rate, so that we open rate, click-through, form submissions, doesn't really make sense on an email very much, or download rate if you use Mautic's asset delivery feature. So let's keep it with this. With this setup, so we could just save this, and then it's a subject line test, or we can go into the email builder and make changes. So here, if we go back into emails, we have this symbol that says it has an A/B test running. And down here, there's variants. So here we can see, I can activate this as well. So this would then start the test, and we can have multiple variants. Now, the problem here is in how this is sent and how you take action on the A/B test. Because the way this works is that I have this email that has two versions, and these emails are separate from the sending. The sending happens in a campaign. So I create a campaign, and what the campaign does is it sends this email. And it will send the email to all the contacts in the campaign. And the idea is that I can then come back and look at the statistics to see which one performed better. In other words, I have to then take manual action. So this will show me the statistics, but I have to take manual action on which one to keep sending. It's not that useful for broadcast emails. And also, I have to say that like the whole setup of the emails and the A/B test variations and the sending and so on is quite convoluted in this tool. Now, inside a campaign, inside an automation, building a campaign, we can build flows, workflows like this as well. So let's open the builder here. So here in a flow like this, we can have triggers, we can have sending options, we can have conditions, and we can choose emails to send. And here we can choose to send an email that has an A/B test running. That means if we have an automation like this, where people are coming in and going through this continuously, then there it makes sense. There I can get some use out of it, because I can, let's say, let this run for a week or so and then check which email is performing better, and then make sure that that email is going to be sent to everyone who comes through this automation in the future. So in summary, with Mautic, we have a fairly complicated and not that useful A/B testing feature for broadcasts. And we can insert A/B tests in our flows, but again, we can't test totally separate flows against each other. And overall, my main problem here is that it's just not nice to use, right? It's quite complicated. You have the email that has variants, but each variant has like its own interface, and it's not quite sure. And then you have to go to campaigns to actually send the email. It's all a bit complicated. And it's the kind of thing where, I can see this as one of these features that it's there, but you'll end up not using it very often, because it's just not, it's not user-friendly enough. So that is Mautic. Now, our next two tools are really quick, because SendinBlue has no A/B testing features for either broadcasts or follow-ups. And the same is true for Sendy. So Sendy comes up a lot because it's a very cheap solution that you self-host and use with Amazon SES. And same here, there's just no A/B testing features whatsoever in sight. So the last two tools on our list are pretty easy to get a grip on. So overall, as you can see, that there's basically three, let's say, broad categories here. Number one is actually ActiveCampaign in its own category, because it has just badass A/B testing features both for your broadcast and for your, conditional follow-up automation stuff. It's basically anything you want to test, you can do. The only thing that's missing is testing for revenue. Then we have several tools like GetResponse, MailChimp, and ConvertKit that have some A/B testing features. You can do some A/B testing. Often you can just A/B test broadcasts, but you can't test everything. And that's great. I would say that anything that has at least some A/B testing features, or at least you can test some subject lines and so on, that would be a minimum for me to even consider using a tool. And then we have a third category of tools where there are no A/B testing features at all, or the A/B testing features are so limited or so complicated or so annoying to use that they might as well not exist. And I would put, like, you know, Mautic and Drip are both solutions where, okay, they both have A/B testing, but are you going to use it? Are you going to be happy with it? It's questionable. Now, to get a better overview of all this, you can check, if you're watching this on YouTube, check the link in the description. Otherwise, just scroll down on the blog post and there's a comparison table and some written summaries of this. And of course, I would love to know if you have other experiences, if you have other tools that you think I should look at, or if you have any questions about how to make use of this kind of stuff, just leave a comment below, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your feedback. So check out the blog post that goes with this. Pretty important information there, and a much easier way to get an overview over, you know, and make a decision basically based on a comparison table I've put together for you. And that's all. I'm Shane Malach from Active Growth. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.